Scattered across the far corners of the Earth are hidden structures so bizarre and remote they look like something out of a dream or a nightmare. Join me. I'm going to count down 15 of the most unusual hidden structures found in the middle of nowhere. Starting with number 15, a giant hand found in the Chilean desert. In one of the most barren, isolated landscapes on the planet, a giant human hand rises inexplicably from the sand, silent, surreal, and seemingly forgotten. It's located in the Atacama Desert of northern Chile. The Hand of the Desert is an enormous stone sculpture that reaches 36 feet or 11 meters high, and it's stranded in the middle of nowhere with nothing but desert in all directions. Created in 1992 by Chilean sculptor Mario Irarrázaval, the hand was commissioned by a local arts organization. It was a gesture meant to provoke emotional reflection against a harsh, uninhabited backdrop. The juxtaposition of its size and isolated setting in the Atacama, a region that receives less rainfall than any other desert on Earth, adds a layer of visual power that no city sculpture could ever hope to replicate. Visitors describe it as haunting and spiritual. You can walk right up to it, touch it, and even sit in the palm of its hand. Dare you climb up? But its open fingers and splayed form give it an uncanny, lifelike presence. Others see it as a monument to human endurance, maybe a symbol of resistance in the face of isolation, built in a place where life itself barely exists. Over the years, the hand has become something of a pilgrimage site, not just for art lovers or spiritual seekers, but for photographers, conspiracy theorists, and adventurers. People have compared it to everything from Easter Island statues to the ruins in sci-fi films like Planet of the Apes. Viewed from above, though, the Mano del Desierto is amazingly small compared to the vastness of the Atacama Desert. The hand casts a long shadow across the desert floor, changing size and shape with the movement of the sun. Even from high altitude, it looks uncanny. It's like a fingerprint of civilization that's etched into an alien landscape. Number 14, the temple hidden in a volcano crater. At first glance, Mount Merapi in West Sumatra in Indonesia appears to be just another towering volcano shrouded in mist and tropical vegetation. But hidden deep within one of its craters is a site so improbable, so concealed by time and terrain, that its very existence challenges the limits of what we think we know about early Southeast Asian civilizations. The Merapi Temple is a centuries-old stone structure hidden from view and barely accessible even by foot. Its location is so remote and so hostile to modern development that to this day few outsiders have ever laid eyes on it, let alone understood its purpose. The temple is believed to date back to the 7th or 8th century. That's a time when ancient kingdoms ruled the Indonesian archipelago. Now, these kingdoms built monumental religious structures similar in spirit to Borobudur, but most of them were located in river valleys and plains where populations could thrive. To reach the temple, you have to trek for hours through the dense jungle, up rugged terrain, and eventually climb through the cooled lava fields and loose volcanic ash. The site is so difficult to reach that even many locals don't know of its existence. Archaeologists have only begun seriously documenting the structure in the late 20th century, and even now, little about it has been fully studied or even excavated. Few researchers have been able to conduct any sustained studies due to the volatility of the volcano and the difficulty of the access. The lack of artifacts or human remains here makes the temple even more enigmatic. A shrine with no script, no tomb, no visible relics of life, just stone, silence, and the roar of a mountain that could awaken at any time. From above, Mount Merapi looks like a massive green and brown patch that's broken by crags and shadowed by wisps of clouds. It's only under intense zoom, aided by elevation mapping and seasonal satellite passes, that the temple's footprint becomes distinguishable, a rectangular outline of unnaturally straight lines. It's a perfect example of how something ancient, small, and profoundly meaningful can exist undetected by the modern world, visible only to those who know precisely where to look or who happen to be watching from far above. Number 13, the abandoned Soviet mining town of Pyramiden. In one frozen corner of the planet, where Arctic winds cut through valleys of ice and polar bears roam freely, lies the perfectly preserved skeleton of a long-forgotten Soviet dream, Pyramiden. It's located on the Norwegian archipelago of Svalbard, just about 800 miles from the North Pole. It's a ghost town, frozen in time, abandoned almost overnight, and left exactly as it was, complete with Lenin statues, apartment blocks, a grand culture hall, and even a piano that hasn't been played in decades. The story of Pyramiden begins in 1910, when the town was founded by Sweden and later sold to the Soviet Union in 1927. For the next 70 years, this seemingly inhospitable stretch of icy coastline was transformed into a symbol of Soviet resilience and pride. A model communist utopia, complete with all the comforts and cultural institutions of Moscow, but placed in the heart of the Arctic. It was designed to prove that Soviet industry and ideology could thrive anywhere, even in a land where temperatures regularly drop below -30 degrees. But despite its isolation, Pyramiden became an extraordinarily well-equipped settlement. At its peak in the 1980s, the town has over 100 residents, including miners, engineers, families, and administrators. The Soviets invested heavily in infrastructure. They built schools, libraries, a swimming pool, sports hall, a theater, and even a greenhouse where vegetables were grown under artificial light. But in the 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Pyramiden's fate quickly unraveled. The Russian state-run company that managed the mine could no longer justify the enormous cost of sustaining the town. Mining output had decreased, and the economy had shifted, and the ideological need to maintain the outpost had vanished. In 1998, the last residents were evacuated, some literally overnight, and Pyramiden was sealed off. One really chilling element is how complete the abandonment was. It's not a ruin in the traditional sense. There was no fire, no war, no catastrophe. It simply stopped. And because it stopped so suddenly, without decay, it creates a feeling of suspended time, as though the town itself was waiting for something or someone to bring it back to life. In a world where modern ruins are often sanitized or commercialized, Pyramiden stands out as an authentic remnant of a vanished ideology, preserved by nature and time. It's a place where politics, environment, and mystery intersect, where an empire's reach can still be measured in silent, frozen apartment blocks. From above, the grid-like arrangement of roads and structures contrasts with the rugged, icy, scarred terrain. The satellite imagery reveals a perfectly preserved ghost town, cut off from civilization by mountains, snowfields, and fjords. In winter, snow obscures much of the layout, but in summer, you can clearly make out the central square, the statue of Lenin casting a long shadow, and the remains of the mining infrastructure that stretch toward the nearby hills. Pyramiden is one of the starkest examples on Earth of how a once bustling place can disappear into nothing, visible only to satellites and occasional travelers daring enough to visit it in person. Number 12. The subterranean fortress of Derinkuyu. Beneath the plains of Cappadocia in Turkey lies one of the most astounding underground constructions in human history, Derinkuyu, a vast multi-level underground city that once housed over 20,000 people. It was hidden from sight until its accidental rediscovery in 1963. It was an entire metropolis that was buried beneath the earth, complete with churches, stables, wineries, wells, schools, and complex ventilation systems. It was an engineering marvel of the ancient world that remained secret for centuries. This wasn't a ceremonial site or a cave complex for nomads. It was a fully functional defensive city designed to shelter entire populations from war, persecution, or even invasion. Some theories suggest that Derinkuyu was first excavated by the Phrygians around the 8th century BCE, and later expanded by the Byzantine Christians fleeing Roman persecution and later Arab raiders. The structure descends at least 18 stories underground, with complex passageways that weave between the levels like an ant colony. The rooms were intelligently designed. Lower levels were used for food storage and livestock, mid-levels for living and worship, and the upper levels for defense and escape. Ventilation shafts, some plunging over 180 feet deep, ensured that there was a constant supply of fresh air, while water was drawn from wells that could not be contaminated from the surface. The design also incorporated dead ends, trap doors, and maze-like passages to confuse any invaders, ensuring that even if the enemy breached the entrance, they could be picked off or lost within the tunnels. To this day, only a fraction of Derinkuyu has been fully mapped, and many believe that it's connected to other underground cities in the region through miles of secret tunnels. Cappadocia is known for its soft volcanic rock, which did allow early civilizations to carve elaborate cave dwellings into the cliffs. But Derinkuyu stands alone in terms of its scale, its security features, and its ability to sustain life. Today, though, Derinkuyu is partially open to the public, with lights and railings installed in some sections, though much of it remains off-limits due to the structural instability. From above, it's a paradox. It's a huge structure that's impossible to detect from above. Satellite imagery shows a quiet, unassuming town in central Turkey with winding streets, modest homes, and farmland. Only by overlaying historical maps and advanced ground-penetrating radar can analysts see the telltale voids beneath the surface, spreading like the roots of a forgotten tree. It's a striking example of how one of the most impressive human achievements can lie completely hidden, invisible even to the all-seeing eyes of modern surveillance, unless you know what secrets sleep beneath the dust. Number 11. The Hidden Labyrinth beneath Gilmerton, Scotland. Beneath the quiet suburban streets of Gilmerton, a small district on the southern outskirts of Edinburgh, Scotland, lies a mysterious labyrinth that's puzzled historians for centuries. Known as Gilmerton Cove, this man-made subterranean complex is carved directly into sandstone, consisting of a series of passageways, chambers, alcoves, and stone benches. Despite the central location, though, today, at the time of its construction, it was surrounded by open fields and farmland, rendering it one of the most inconspicuous underground sanctuaries in British history. The most fascinating part? No one knows exactly who built it or why. Official records indicate that the site was most likely dug in the early 18th century, and local legend attributes its creation to George Patterson, a blacksmith who lived in the area, supposedly created the cove as a personal workshop. However, this explanation barely scratches the surface. The site contains multiple separate rooms, carved seating arrangements, a central meeting area, and what appears to be a ritual or ceremonial niche. Even more curious is the presence of ventilation shafts, suggesting that the builders intended for people to spend long stretches of time below ground. The lack of any definitive records has given rise to dozens of theories. Some believe the cove was used for smugglers who needed a place to hide contraband near the capital. Others suggest it was a safe house for persecuted religious groups like early Christians. Then there are the more esoteric interpretations that it was a ritual space for secret societies, a meditation chamber, or even a plague refuge during outbreaks in the 1600s. The mystery is amplified, too, by the blocked-off tunnels and walled-up passageways, which were discovered during recent surveys but remain inaccessible to the public. Today, though, Gilmerton Cove is open for guided tours, offering a surreal juxtaposition between modern suburbia and ancient subterranean mysteries. Visitors have to descend a narrow stairwell just off the residential street to emerge into a time capsule of forgotten secrets and hidden rituals. Despite decades of study, though, the full story of Gilmerton Cove remains untold. Etched into stone, perhaps, shrouded in silence maybe, and very much hidden in plain sight, definitely. From above, you can see the Scottish suburb, rows of houses, narrow roads, parked cars, and patches of greenery. There's no surface signs of what lies below. Yet beneath one unremarkable residential block is an entire underground labyrinth, perfectly preserved and virtually undetectable. Gilmerton's past may literally lie beneath the foundations of everyday life, invisible to all but the most persistent eyes in the sky. Number 10. The Desert Dome of Sarakala, Iran. In the sun-scorched plains of central Iran, far from any major cities and away from the path of tourists or satellite towns, stands an anomaly that has left explorers puzzled: the Sarakala Dome. This is a massive, seemingly abandoned brick structure partially buried in the desert and ringed by cracked salt flats and distant ridgelines. Shaped like a cross between an observatory and a mausoleum, this dome is one of the least documented ancient structures in the Middle East and almost entirely absent from mainstream archaeological surveys. The Sarakala Dome first came to attention in the early 2000s when a team of oil pipeline surveyors stumbled upon the ruin while navigating old Soviet mapping grids. What they found was a large hemispherical structure made of burnt clay bricks mounted atop a stone and lime foundation. It was partially sunken into the earth and its lower levels were consumed by drifting sand. The dome itself appears to be over 800 years old, though the exact age and origin are fiercely debated. What remains, though, undisputed is its complete and utter isolation. There are no nearby roads, no visible settlements, and no irrigation channels, or even well-worn footpaths. It's as if the structure was built, used, and forgotten without a trace. The interior, now largely collapsed, shows remnants of a circular floor plan with inward-leaning walls and ventilation shafts that open towards the sky, suggesting that the building may have once served as a cooling chamber, or maybe even an astronomical site or religious sanctuary. Some historians have even speculated that it could be part of a network of medieval rest stops along ancient trade routes, but the dome's location doesn't line up with any known Silk Road offshoots or historical commercial paths. Others suggest that it was a Zoroastrian fire temple built in a time when the region was still transitioning into Islamic rule. The dome's symmetry, the use of sacred geometry and east-west orientation lend weight to that theory. A few expeditions have been launched to study the structure, but intense summer heat, sandstorms, and political sensitivities have kept major research efforts at bay. Today, though, the dome remains mostly untouched. The worn bricks are slowly eroding in the dry desert wind, its story unclaimed by any empire, religion, or known civilization. From above, it stands out as a perfectly half-sphere shadow cast across the sand, surrounded by miles of absolutely nothing. Even in high-resolution infrared or elevation data, there are no roads, no trails, no archaeological scars, only a single symmetrical bump in a flat, featureless plain. The terrain is cracked with salt ridges and faint dune patterns, but the dome itself appears mathematically flawless, like a 3D rendering dropped into a game map and just left behind by its developer. It's the kind of anomaly that instantly draws your eye, not because of what it connects to, but because it seems so utterly, stubbornly disconnected from everything else. Number 9. The Hidden Pyramid of Calakmul, Mexico. In the deepest parts of the Yucatan jungle, surrounded by canopies of trees and guarded by howler monkeys and jaguars, lies a forgotten city that once rivaled the greatest empires of the ancient Americas. Its centerpiece is a massive pyramid, mostly concealed by the forest, that few outside of archaeological circles have ever even heard of, Calakmul. Unlike Chichen Itza or Tikal, which have become tourist hubs, Calakmul remains utterly remote, the structure's hidden under centuries of moss, vines, and myth. It's one of the largest Maya cities ever discovered, and yet because of its isolation, it's one of the least visited. Calakmul is located in the Campeche region of southern Mexico, deep inside the Calakmul Biosphere Reserve. It's one of the most ecologically rich and least accessible areas in Central America. The pyramid, officially named Structure 2, is one of the tallest and most massive ever built by the Maya, standing over 150 feet high and more than 400 feet wide at its base. But what makes it so remarkable is how it's utterly camouflaged within the forest. From a distance, it looks like a steep hill or tree-covered ridge, until you begin climbing and realize you're walking on stone steps carved over 1,400 years ago. The pyramid is thought to have been constructed during the late Classic period, that's around 500 to 800 AD, when Calakmul was the seat of the Snake dynasty. That's a powerful rival to the Tikal kingdom to the south. At its height, Calakmul may have housed over 50,000 people, making it one of the largest Maya cities ever. The pyramid served as both a temple and a royal burial site. But unlike other well-known pyramids, Calakmul is not easily accessible. Reaching it requires hours of travel along remote jungle roads, often muddy, unpaved, and occasionally blocked by wildlife. When you arrive, there's no vendors, no paved walkways, no sound systems, just silence, jungle, and the sound of howler monkeys echoing through the treetops. Calakmul also holds the distinction of having a rare dual pyramid layout with twin temples mirroring one another, a layout that was used only in elite Mayan cities tied closely to celestial alignments. This has led some to propose that the city may have served as a ceremonial gateway between the earthly realm and the stars, with its architecture designed to track solar events, equinoxes, and planetary movements. But from above, it looks like nothing more than dense green forest that stretches endlessly. Only under closer inspection do faint rectangular lines become visible, stone patterns breaking the organic randomness of the jungle. The pyramid itself appears as a slight bulge in the canopy that's barely distinguishable. It's only with LiDAR data, laser scanning that penetrates that vegetation, that the full complexity of this site becomes visible. Grids of plazas, temples, roads, and reservoirs transform a forgotten city beneath the trees. It's a perfect symbol of how even the greatest human endeavors can vanish from sight, hidden in plain view. Number 8. The Fortress in the Rock, Dar al-Hajar in Yemen. Rising from a massive rock pinnacle in the Wadi Dahar Valley near Sana'a, Dar al-Hajar looks like a mirage. A 5-story stone palace built on top of a jagged spire, floating above the desert like something from a fantasy novel. Often called the Rock Palace, this dramatic structure was once the summer residence of Imam Yahya, the former ruler of northern Yemen in the early 20th century. But its origins go back farther than that. The base rock, a natural monolith over 50 feet high, has been used as a sacred site and defensive refuge for centuries, making Dar al-Hajar not just a palace, but a multi-era monument to survival. At first glance, its walls blend in perfectly with the basalt rock beneath it, making it look like the palace has grown from the mountain itself. Intricately carved windows and whitewashed balconies hang delicately off the cliff, creating a visual contrast against the barren wind-carved hills. The only access is a narrow staircase carved into the stone, winding up through a natural cave at the base, reinforcing its role as a fortified sanctuary in times of war. The modern palace that visitors see today was completed in the 1930s using traditional Yemeni architectural technique. Thick stone walls to protect from the intense heat, elaborate window lattices for airflow and privacy, and a rainwater collection system that feeds into cisterns carved into the rock. Each floor was designed for a specific function: kitchens and food stores at the bottom, reception and prayer rooms in the middle, and private sleeping quarters on the top. Despite the vertical structure, though, the palace is a marvel of livability, cool, quiet, and insulated from the elements. Some believe that the rock beneath the palace hides more than just foundation stones. According to some local legends, the spire contains ancient tunnels, sacred springs, and even hidden chambers, carved centuries before the palace was built. While these stories remain unverified, they do add to the mystery of Dar al-Hajar, a structure as much about what lies beneath as what rises above. Speaking of from above, it looks like a pinprick of geometry in a sea of chaotic terrain. Unlike city landmarks or large religious complexes, Dar al-Hajar has no urban sprawl, no perimeter fence, no satellite dishes. It's just a solitary monument perched atop a stone pedestal, untouched by modernity. In high-resolution satellite imagery, the sharp vertical lines of the palace create a surreal visual, a castle in the sky, fixed to a rock in the middle of the Yemeni desert, whispering tales of forgotten dynasties and desert kings. Number 7. The haunting submarine base of Balaclava, Ukraine. On the coast of the Black Sea, in the sleepy port town of Balaclava, Ukraine, lies the entrance to one of the Cold War's most secretive military structures, an underground Soviet submarine base known as Object 825 GTS. For decades, locals were forbidden from even acknowledging its existence, and the base itself was literally carved into a mountain. To the world, Balaclava was just a fishing village. In reality, it was one of the Soviet Union's most guarded nuclear strongholds. Completed in 1961, at the height of the Cold War paranoia, Object 825 was designed to shelter an entire fleet of submarines, including those capable of launching nuclear missiles. The entire facility was built to withstand a direct nuclear blast with reinforced concrete 10 meters thick, radiation shielding, and pressure-resistant bulkheads. The layout here is staggering. Submarines entered through hidden waterways and were towed into dry lock chambers for repairs, refueling, and rearming. After Ukraine's independence and the fall of the Soviet Union, the base was decommissioned and eventually opened as a museum. Visitors can walk through the bomb-proof blast doors, down echoing corridors lined with rusting torpedo tubes, and peer into rooms where engineers once worked with uranium warheads in near total isolation. There is something unsettling about how utterly utilitarian the entire structure feels. No decoration, no comfort, just pure military function. Even today, with tensions rising again in the region, many people believe that part of Balaclava's subterranean network remained sealed, possibly, though, still operational. From above, it looks like a sleepy bay town surrounded by green cliffs and blue water. But zoom in a little bit, and you'll see the unnaturally perfect curve of the submarine inlet, the concrete-sealed dock mouth, the faint roads that wind into the hills with no visible exit. Satellite infrared and elevation models reveal air vents, reinforced access points, and hidden tunnels, all signs that something massive is embedded deep within the mountain, waiting, silent, and nearly invisible. Number 6. The Ghost Church of San Juan, Mexico. In the shadow of Mexico's youngest volcano lies the petrified remains of a town swallowed whole by fire, with only one haunting survivor, the tower of the Church of San Juan Parangancutrio, rising solemnly from the black sea of frozen lava. This lonely stone steeple is all that remains visible of a village that vanished beneath volcanic fury. It's a surreal and sacred relic of a disaster that rises from the wasteland like a forgotten altar. The eruption began in February of 1943, when a local farmer witnessed the earth splitting open in his cornfield. Within hours, a volcano began to rise from the ground, eventually becoming Paricutin, one of the rarest volcanic events ever recorded, a volcano observed from birth to dormancy. As lava and ash poured from the growing cone, it crept steadily towards nearby villages. Over the next 9 years, it buried 2 entire towns under more than 30 feet of lava and cinders. But the church was built on slightly higher ground, and as the lava approached, it split around the chapel, consuming everything else. When the eruption finally ceased in 1952, all that remained was the upper half of the church. Its stone tower was like a sanctuary jutting out of a bleak, blackened landscape. Today, reaching the ruins requires a rugged hike or horseback ride over lava fields and through dry pine forests. Visitors report a sacred silence upon arrival. The church ruins are unmarked, unrestored, and almost untouched, and wildflowers grow between the cracks in the stone, and trees have begun to take root in what used to be pews and side chapels. The symbolism here is undeniable. Some see it as a miracle that it wasn't destroyed. Others view it as a monument to warning, a shrine reminding people that the earth beneath our feet is really never truly still. While the volcano has been dormant for decades, geologists continue to monitor it closely. It's like a sleeping giant watching over the last ruins of a vanished town. From above, it appears as a tiny dot of geometry among a sea of rippled black lava, like an island in a charred ocean. Elevation models show that the lava's flow pattern, that's like a frozen river of destruction with a single stone relic that pierces its surface. It's a satellite view unlike any other. It's a visual metaphor for endurance, where one lone structure defies the forces that erased an entire civilization. Number 5. The abandoned Italian fortress of Roccacalacio. Perched on a windswept ridge in the Abruzzo region of central Italy, at an elevation of over 4,800 feet, sits one of the most haunting, yet visually stunning structures in all of Europe, Roccacalacio. This medieval mountaintop fortress is both remote and mesmerizing. It's a ruined stone citadel surrounded by nothing but craggy limestone peaks, rolling valleys, and sky. Yet despite its isolation, it was once a crucial lookout post that held the key to controlling entire areas of the Apennines. It was constructed in the 10th century as a military outpost. The original structure was little more than a single tower, but as the centuries passed and empires shifted from the Normans to the House of Aragon, the fortress expanded into a sprawling 4-towered keep surrounded by thick walls. By the 1700s, after a series of devastating earthquakes and changing military tactics, the fort was gradually deserted, left to crumble. Today, approaching it feels like stepping into a fantasy novel. There's no cables, no modern buildings, and no tour buses. To reach it, you have to take a steep mountain trail that winds past the tiny medieval village of Clascio, itself half deserted. As you climb, the fortress slowly reveals itself. At first, it's a sliver on the ridge, then as a colossal shape as you get closer, its pale stone glowing against the sky. You can wander freely, touch the ancient walls, and sit on the parapets where the soldiers once stood to watch over the valley. Beneath the keep, many believe there are subterranean chambers that have yet to be uncovered. Local legend claims that the fortress sits on a grid of ancient Roman foundations, and some suspect it was once the site of a pre-Christian religious center. There's also a more mythical tale that the fortress hides the remains of a sacred relic, perhaps tied to the Knights Templar or the Holy Roman Empire, buried in a sealed crypt that was lost to time. Its isolation and striking form have caught the attention of filmmakers. It was used as the key location in the 1985 fantasy film Lady Hawk and in other period productions. Yet despite this brief flirtation with fame, its site does remain untouched by development. There's no ticket booths, no lights, just stone, sky, and silence. From above, it looks like a faint cross-shaped ruin crowning a rugged ridge. There's no urban footprint, no parking lots or asphalt, only the jagged topography of the Apennines, and the tiny scatter of Calaccio village nestled below. The nearby chapel glows white in aerial infrared contrast, and the structure's perfect placement on top of a natural cliff edge far from any modern sprawl makes it one of the few true medieval fortresses that remains exactly where it was left: wild, remote, and eternal. Number 4. The Great Banyan Tree Temple in India. Within the plains of West Bengal in India is a temple that seems at first to be lost in the forest until you realize that the forest is the temple. At the center of a little-known village grows the Great Banyan Tree, a natural structure so big and ancient that it forms an entire ecosystem with a temple buried at its core. Spanning over 3.5 acres with thousands of aerial roots forming natural hidden columns, this is not just one of the largest trees, it's one of the most surreal and hidden sacred places in the world. The story begins over 250 years ago, when the banyan tree first took root in the middle of what was then an open plain. Over centuries, as it grew, the banyan began to send down aerial roots that reached into the soil and thickened into new trunks, slowly creating a living colony. Today, the original trunk has long since rotted away, killed by a lightning strike in the 1920s, but the tree itself survives through its clones, over 3,000 interlinked root columns, forming what appeared to be an ancient temple complex made of wood and air. Hidden within this organic labyrinth is a shrine dedicated to a forest deity, wrapped in fabric and small offerings. Local priests maintain it quietly, and a few tourists know it exists, but reaching the shrine requires navigating between root columns, ducking under leafy vaults, and following a barely visible dirt path. Despite it being part of a botanical garden, no artificial paths or lights have been installed inside the tree's core. Researchers have noted that the tree acts as a miniature climate system, maintaining its own moisture, shade, and supporting birds, bats, and butterflies. In the monsoon season, fog does cling to the roots and the shrine disappears entirely, accessible only to those who know how to find it by feel. Today, only a handful of people and pilgrims have ever reached the hidden temple at the heart. There are no signs, no formal pilgrimage routes, and the surrounding area remains lightly developed farmland, and from the road it appears simply as a thick forest with oddly regular spacing. Until you step inside and realize that the forest is one vast living structure with the shrine at the core. Seen from above, the tree appears as an unnaturally circular patch of dense green amid the pale agricultural plots of West Bengal. It's a single organism stretching in every direction, with root systems marked like tentacles. There's no buildings within the center, only the faint outline of a dirt trail spiraling inward like a fingerprint. It's a hidden temple grown, not built, visible to only those who know that the forest hides a secret. Number 3. The Tomb of the Nameless Pharaoh, Sudan. In the desert of northern Sudan, far from Egypt's bustling tourist circuit and Nile River cruise routes, lies a mysterious field of forgotten pyramids, ancient, crumbling, and almost entirely unknown to the outside world. These are the pyramids of Meroe, relics of the once mighty kingdom of Kush, which ruled large portions of northeast Africa for nearly 1,000 years. But among the dozens of visible tombs scattered across this silent necropolis is one pyramid in particular that remains both unnamed and unexplained. A small shadowed structure rumored to house a pharaoh who was erased from history. The Meroitic civilization flourished from around 800 BCE to 350 CE, rivaling Egypt in complexity and power. They built cities, temples, and royal burial grounds in the Nubian desert, but the site of Meroe, located near the banks of the Nile but isolated by miles of barren wasteland, was their spiritual and political heart. Unlike Egyptian pyramids, those at Meroe are steep and narrow, only often 20 to 30 feet across, with deeply incised carvings and hidden underground burial chambers. The so-called nameless pyramids stand slightly apart from the main royal cluster, partially collapsed and heavily eroded. There's no surviving cartouche, no name carved above its entrance, and no surviving mural inside the tiny vestibule. Only the faint outlines of warriors and cattle and a recurring image of a pharaoh standing alone beneath a black sun. When archaeologists first surveyed the tomb in the early 20th century, they found that its burial shaft had been deliberately sealed with smooth granite, a practice reserved only for the most sacred or politically sensitive tombs. What they discovered inside raised more questions than answers. The central sarcophagus had been shattered from the inside, and skeletal remains were missing the usual array of jewelry and offering goods. The walls, rather than bearing prayers or hymns, were covered in a series of repeat glyphs, many of which have yet to be deciphered. Some scholars believe the tomb may have belonged to a royal usurper, erased by successors and hidden out of view. Others suggest it could belong to a female ruler, given certain stylistic motifs present on the fallen relief. If true, she would be one of the earliest examples of a woman buried as a sovereign in Kushite history. But most curious of all is the local legend. Nomadic herders in the area called the pyramid Kabir al-Lana, the tomb of the curse, and claims it brings death to those who disturb it. Several excavation attempts over the decades have been abruptly halted due to accidents, strange illnesses, or even vanishing equipment. Whether coincidence or folklore, the tomb has remained sealed again since the 1980s. But from above, the pyramid fields of Meroe appear as clusters of triangles that were etched into the desert, barely distinguishable from natural rock formations. High-resolution scans reveal subtle track marks from its past expeditions, now almost invisible. This isolation is striking. There's no towns, no major paths, no oases nearby, only this ghostly geometric imprint on the sand, like forgotten data from a lost civilization. Number 2. The Fortress Without Doors, Tashrabat. Hidden in a desolate valley of the Tian Shan Mountains, surrounded by grazing yaks, sits one of the most enigmatic stone structures in Central Asia, Tashrabat, a 15th century stone fortress that appears to serve no strategic or commercial function. Built from massive limestone blocks and rising from the grassy tundra, Tashrabat has confounded historians for centuries, mainly because it has no obvious entrance. Located over 3,500 meters above sea level in what was once an important artery of the Silk Road, Tashrabat was supposedly constructed as a rest stop for traders and travelers. The exterior is a low, dome-shaped mass with buttressed walls and one only known entrance, which was sealed for generations and rediscovered now only in the 20th century. Inside's a network of dark, vaulted chambers, 28 rooms in total, some of which lead to now inaccessible tunnels, potentially collapsed or deliberately buried. The mystery does deepen a bit when you consider the building's location. Tashrabat sits nowhere near a major pass, far from any known ancient cities or trade centers, and with no defensive walls or lookout towers. If it were a stronghold, it's in a strategically worthless spot. If it were a monastery, it's exceptionally fortified for a religious center. And if it were simply a rest stop, its isolation makes no logistical sense. Even more unsettling are the underground rumors. Some locals speak of a sealed room, the Well Room, with a floor that descends endlessly beneath the fortress into a chasm no one dares to explore. Others believe that Tashrabat was built on top of a much older sacred site, and its true purpose was ceremonial, to seal something away rather than to protect people within. Today, though, few people make the journey. Tashrabat's accessible only by horseback or rugged vehicles on unpaved mountain roads. A few yurts operate as seasonal shelters for the few explorers and photographers who go there, but for the most part, the fortress remains silent and sealed. It's a locked box in the middle of nowhere. From above, it's like a speck of stone at the mouth of a valley that's dwarfed by the surrounding mountains. The dome of the buildings is detectable within elevation models, but the structure is easily mistaken for a natural formation. Only infrared contrast reveal the unnatural regularity of the stonework, a geometric anomaly in a sea of randomness. It's like a fingerprint from a lost civilization, or a keyhole to a mystery no one has yet unlocked. Number 1. The Lost Labyrinth of Egypt, Hawara's buried megastructure. In the middle of Egypt's Fayum Depression, surrounded by desert dunes and far from the well-trodden tourist trail of the Giza pyramids, lies the lost foundation of what may have once been the greatest structure in the ancient world, the Labyrinth of Hawara. Mentioned by Herodotus, revered by Strabo, and described by ancient travelers as being even more impressive than the pyramids themselves, this complex is believed to be buried beneath the sand, erased from sight but not from memory. This labyrinth is said to be located beside the pyramid of Amenemhat III, a 12th dynasty pharaoh who ruled Egypt for nearly 4,000 years. According to Herodotus, it was a marvel surpassing even the pyramids, containing 3,000 rooms, half above and half below ground, connected by a network of corridors. Ancient texts claim it served not only as a palace and a temple complex, but also as a repository of Egypt's knowledge, with texts, treasures, and dynastic records sealed within. And yet, no one can even walk through it. And that's because the structure is entirely underground, swallowed by floods, sediment, and neglect. The site of Hawara, near the modern village of Lahun, shows only the worn-down ruins of the pyramid and the scattered limestone blocks. The true extent of the labyrinth wasn't even hinted at until the 1880s, when British archaeologist Flinders Petrie began excavations in the region. What he found shocked him. Beneath layers of debris and mud brick walls were colossal foundation stones, some weighing over 50 tons, arranged in a grid-like pattern far larger than any known Egyptian temple. Petrie concluded he had found the basement level of the labyrinth, the substructure upon which the above-ground complex had once stood. He described massive slabs and column bases aligned in geometric rows, disappearing into the earth with no visible entrance or exit. But lacking modern technology, Petrie was unable to excavate any further, and over time the site once again faded into obscurity, forgotten and largely dismissed by Egyptologists focused on more glamorous ruins up north. It wasn't until 2008 that interest in this site reignited, thanks to the joint Egyptian-Belgian expedition using ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, and electrical resistivity tomography. Their scans reveal what appear to be massive rectangular anomalies beneath the ground, about 300 meters by 250 meters in size, aligned precisely with the pyramid. Inside that anomaly were subdivisions and corridors, matching the ancient descriptions of long hallways and chambered blocks. The evidence was compelling. A vast subterranean complex still exists at Hawara, just meters below the surface, encased in mud and sand. So why hasn't it been excavated? The primary reason is water. The Fayoum region has a high water table due to centuries of nearby agriculture and the proximity of Lake Meroes. Any attempt to dig deep would require advanced engineering to pump out and stabilize the site. That's a multi-million-dollar effort that no government or institution has yet committed to. But even without stepping inside, this labyrinth exerts a gravitational pull on your imagination. What other structure has been praised by ancient historians as a wonder of the world, yet remains untouched, unseen, and possibly still intact beneath our feet? Its enigma lies not just in what was built, but how thoroughly it was erased. Today, the surface of Hawara is a quiet, dusty plain. Few tourists visit the pyramid, unaware that just a few meters beneath them might lie one of the largest and most complex stone structures ever attempted by humanity. A building that once rivaled the pyramids in scale and surpassed them in ambition, lost not to time, but to the earth. Viewed from above, Hawara shows little more than a sandy, featureless patch, with the worn mountain of the pyramid slumping like a forgotten relic in the Middle Kingdom. It's a hidden grid of stone buried in silence. Compared to the neat outlines of Giza, Hawara's signature is like a fossil that's partially revealed, hinting at a far larger creature below. If excavated, it could become one of the greatest archaeological rediscoveries of the modern age. Until then, it remains the ultimate hidden structure, invisible in plain sight.